Well, good day, people. So I'm going to try to do this video here. I don't know how good the sound is going to come out. I'm not having as good a sound as I would like, but hopefully this will come out clear. The thing that I want to talk about is on buttons and how on buttons are related to people's experience of themselves as irrelevant in their own lives. I mean, it sounds crazy to imagine that a person could come to feel that they're irrelevant to their own life. But I think that's a subtle, it's part of the kind of thinking. It's against a subtle implication that comes from too much exposure to on buttons or just on buttons in general. So first I'm going to see if I can clarify that a little bit, and I want to explain what I mean by on buttons and how they're related to irrelevance, and hopefully this will get clear as we proceed along. In your everyday life, you're never irrelevant to what's going on. That is, the world that you get access to, the world that you're exposed to, the situations that you find yourself in, they always have you in some way as the gravitational center. Now, not that a person is the center of all events, but you can only see the world through your vantage, through your perspective, and it includes like physically where your body is located, but also your age, the history that you have, where the background that you have. It could be a whole host of other factors. But the point is that one is never irrelevant in one's own life. That the world that is experienced by someone, and anything that they know about or hear about, or they, even if somebody comes up and they tell them a story about some event that's going on at a distant land, you could say, okay, I understand that there's some event that's occurring in halfway around the world or in some neighborhood at a distance, but you don't directly experience it as going on independent of you. Now, maybe you can feel it a little bit if you miss an occasion and you knew that it was going on and you overslept or something like this. But you're really not sure if it happened. You then later, people tell you, oh, you missed some event. And even there, they tell you about it after it went on. And if you're not there, you're really not sure what's going on or what happened. But as soon as you get an on button, and I largely mean radio, TV, computer, but as soon as you get on buttons, you get access to worlds and situations that do what they do and go on, potentially without you. And you spectate into them, but you're really very potentially irrelevant to them. And in some way, you get access to a world that goes on without you, in which you're irrelevant. And it's quite, once it's been naturalized, you don't even notice it perhaps, but it's very alien to that original experience of life. The original experience is of everything being where one can't be irrelevant in one's own life. I mean, it's odd to imagine someone being irrelevant in one's own life, and yet on buttons have enabled people to come to experience just that. I mean, take a book. A book doesn't have an on button. It does what it does, it just sits there, and when a person grabs it and they start reading it, well, then the book has this sense of you can work your way through it, but it doesn't go on when the person sets it down. They don't have to panic about keeping up with it. But the on button gives an access to a world that potentially one would have to keep up with because it's going on independent of one. But now when one gets access to it, it feels like, oh, I'm becoming relevant to this world. But what's odd is that oftentimes, perhaps more often than not, it's one is irrelevant in that world. So think of all the people who know, and I'm going to have to give names here just as an illustration, which is so funny. But if I say, Kim Kardashian or Tom Cruise or Julia Roberts, people know who these people are. And yet those stars, they've never heard of us. They've never heard of me, never heard of you. There's no way but to be irrelevant in that situation. The more that you know about people who don't know about you, like by default or just by definition, you're less relevant than they are. I mean, that's what it is. And in some way, if you look at things like Facebook, they're ways that people have tried to mimic Hollywood celebrity culture. So it used to be that the star would go out and they would be seen, and they would wear flashy clothes and have a meal or whatever, and the paparazzi would show up and they would take photos of them and they would be filling the tabloids with that. Now today, people have become their own paparazzi. They jump out, they take selfies, and then they post those on Facebook, other social networking sites, as if they're trying to turn themselves into celebrities in their own world. But that's odd. I mean, it's sort of like these narcissistic disorders that the stars had in Hollywood. They're no longer the monopoly of California and of the stars, but they're of everyday people now. And it's, in many ways, it's just a different form of irrelevance, that one tries to become an observer of one's life, as if trying to look at one's life the way they imagine other people see it will be living a better life, a fuller life, more what life is, rather than actually living one's life in that only world that doesn't go on without one, the real situations in which one's in. I think the more that people access buttons, on buttons, the more that they're surrounded by worlds that go on without them, the more irrelevant they feel in their own lives. They've become witnesses, bystanders, but they don't know how to live their life. They don't know how to do life, how to engage it. They only know how to sit and watch it. And I think the fear is that, again, that they're irrelevant, or the only way to be relevant is to have other people think that they are relevant. It's so strange. What has happened to people? How have on buttons led, I don't know, to this experience of there's a real world out there, and the real world is the world that's going on without me, and then there's just my little life in my world. I mean, that has to be one of the strangest, one of the most bizarre, unintended side effects of the new media and of the mass electronic media generation, that in trying to connect everyone and make the world a more sociable place, in some way it's given more and more people to access to a world in which they themselves don't exist, in which they feel irrelevant, and then that has then bled over into people now assuming a posture of an irrelevant bystander in their own lives. Thanks.